Hi, I'm Padma Mallikarjunan. I am an enterprise support manager at AWS, and I am based out of Austin, Texas. Welcome to AWS Knowledge Center Live, where we share best practices and troubleshooting tips from AWS Support. Joining me today is Hitan Sethi and Michael Beck from AWS. Can you give us a quick introduction, Hitan and Michael?
Sure, Padma. Hi, everyone. I'm Hitan Sethi. I lead global campaigns and global content strategy for migrations at AWS. I'm responsible for educating our customers on the value of migrating to AWS and how we support them through this entire process.
And I am Michael Beck. I'm an enterprise support manager in San Francisco, California, and I help customers who have enterprise support in their cloud journey.
Thank you. Today, we will talk about migrating with AWS, solutions and services to help you with your cloud journey. We will talk about benefits and the best practices for migrating to the cloud. Before we get into the details, a quick note to the attendees online. Feel free to use the chat window on the right hand side of your screen to share your thoughts and ask your questions throughout the episode. We look forward to hearing from you. Hitan, can you walk us through what we are going to be talking about today?
Sure, Padma. We have an exciting agenda planned for our listeners today. What customers are facing is something that we're going to discuss during these unprecedented times. We're going to discuss how customers can build a plan for their application portfolio. What can they do to migrate to the cloud faster? We're going to touch upon a few customer examples. We're also going to go through the migration customer journey in great detail and all its phases: assess, mobilize, migrate, and modernize with Michael. And then Michael is going to share with us some recommended resources for customers to access if they want to accelerate their cloud migrations. With that, I'll just dive deeper into the content. So as we engage with thousands of customers, we see 8 primary reasons for customers to migrate to the cloud. And you can see them here. For a lot of our customers, digital transformation is a top priority, even in these unprecedented times. Some organizations, though, may take a linear approach, which basically means that they may strategically modernize 1 or 2 applications or create better customer-facing processes by using the cloud to differentiate their organization while focusing their efforts on cost reduction overall. Most customers actually acknowledge that agility, staff productivity are also key, and development teams pretty much come to the cloud as a default these days. But what's interesting that we're seeing happening right now is in a lot of our recent conversations with CIOs and VPs of application, infrastructure, big data, customers actually want to reconcile multiple imperatives. Very often, it is not a conversation of whether I want to modernize and I want to reduce costs. It's actually I want to modernize and I want to reduce costs. For example, if you are a healthcare industry player today, the pressure is on to develop vaccines. The pressure is on to develop new ways of accelerating the patient's healthcare outcomes. But at the same time, it is a spend aggressive environment. So you may be spending more than your usual amount because you want to accelerate that pace of vaccine development. But at the same time, if you are a financial institution or a hospitality player, you may be focusing on transforming 1 or 2 key business applications, but actually focusing more of your efforts on cost optimization overall. We have to understand that every CIO today is struggling with these competing priorities, whether they keep transforming or they slow down the migration and modernization as of now and focus on cost saving. But whichever way they choose, they have to understand that there has to be a true north that needs to guide their effort during these unprecedented times. Now, I'm going to quickly share with us value of the cloud that our customers talk about when they migrate. And I'm going to use the Live Nation example here. Now, Live Nation migrated to the cloud a few years back. Their journey is still ongoing. And they produce more concerts, sell more tickets, and connect more brands to music than anyone else in the world. Live Nation actually migrated 118 applications off of their 668 servers. And in the process, they gained 58% cost savings, 50% reduction in operation costs. But for an industry like Live Nation is in, which is concert, at this point in time, their focus was a lot about cost reduction. So they really accelerated their migration to the cloud in order to reduce their overall IT operating costs. Now, what we do recommend our customers that in order to gain this business agility and get true value of the cloud, they need to think about their application portfolio as a whole. We see all CIOs as portfolio managers, and they have built up their application portfolio over the years. Some of these application portfolios are extremely complex as well. And as cloud economics offers disruptive opportunity to change, in fact, 88% of enterprises in a Gartner survey say that they have a cloud-first strategy. So they want to adopt this change, they want to go cloud first, and yet 86% of their infrastructure is still being spent on-premise. Now, the reason for this disconnect is that they don't have enough people with enough skill set and experience to make the cloud work. So they are forced to use existing people, but therein lies another big problem, which is how do these people gain the cloud skill? How do they gain the experience? And what do they do in the short term to really accelerate their migration? This is why a lot of CIOs actually want to move to the cloud faster, but they can't. So what we advise customers is a 3-step process, which is reduce the size of your application portfolio, really look at the applications that you want to keep and get rid of the applications that you want to retire. And then look at the applications that you have in your portfolio that do not necessarily add a lot of differentiating value to the business. And you do not need to necessarily focus your development teams on these applications, because understand that every customer has only a set number of development resources. So you lift and shift and re-platform those applications into the cloud, basically move them really quickly to start seeing your cost advantages pile up, and then focus or your development resources into the applications that are real differentiators for your business and modernize those applications. So that's a strategy that we advise our customers, and we are seeing success with some of our customers who are adopting this strategy as well. Now, let me dive a little bit deeper into the application portfolio discussion. We talked about the value of the cloud and the fact that cost reduction can be a near-term objective, but longer term, you have to look for agility and you have to move faster. So in order for that goal to be achievable, like I said, our customers are adopting that 3-step process. And typically what we are seeing is this view where 50% of the applications are adopted in a lift and shift model, 20% go the way of SaaS, 10% are retired, and about 10 to 20% applications are the one where customers really focus on modernizing the applications and putting their development resources to work. At this point, I do want to bring in Michael Beck as well, who's our enterprise support manager, to get his perspective. Michael, what are you seeing with customers as far as the application portfolio management is concerned?
Yeah, thanks, Hitan. There is a lot of focus from the support perspective at AWS in helping customers really kind of prioritize and identify their workloads and the variety of use cases that they have. I think a good comment Alex Smasha brought up is talking about big challenges, what as he terms or they term can throw away, which apps to throw away. So you do have that question, and that's where you see there is a lot of value in simply doing a lift and shift and just bringing over a lot of things and saying that these are just core, they're static, they're not really helping us differentiate ourselves as a customer in our market segment. And that's where you focus, like you've got here on the slide, really focusing more on that kind of that modernize, right? That 20%. And we really work with a lot of customers and helping them work through what does that look like? You know, which applications are a higher priority and which are the ones allow them to focus on it, and which ones can they perhaps re-platform or rehost, using maybe a SaaS provider, or just prioritize where in that migration backlog that different applications might sit.
Okay, great. Thanks for that perspective. And continuing my chain of thought here, so we talked about cost reduction as well as one of the primary drivers, and Michael explained his view from support. And if you are thinking why 50% of the customers are choosing to lift and shift their applications quickly into the cloud, then this slide might explain that. We see that customers are actually moving faster and faster to the cloud because it offers them great cost reduction benefits. And the fact is, the more and more they scale on the cloud, their benefits actually increase over a period of time. The benefits increase with more application users, the benefit increase with more applications being on the cloud. And also for a lot of our customers, if they choose a cloud exclusively, for example, AWS, instead of going into a multi-cloud environment, they actually see better results, better management of their IT operational costs as well. I want to quickly check in, Padma, is there any question that we have at this point?
Hi, Hayden. I am checking the chat channel. We do not have currently any questions. I encourage our viewers to share your questions. We have our experts, Hitan and Michael, here. A quick question for you, Hitan. So similar to the question that Alex Masha had, how can customers decide what patterns to apply to what application as they
Yeah.
focus on this migration?
Sure. So there are multiple factors to consider: users, scale, business need, cost of maintaining the application, data dependency, and Michael will dive deeper into this in our talk further as well. But we advise customers they really need to focus their development resources, like I said earlier, in modernizing applications that provide maximum value to the business. So we see that this is, at the end of the day, a value analysis that customers have to do. Where am I going to get the most value for deploying my development resources? And moving on, we also found that companies who scale with AWS actually eventually gain better business agility. So as you are doing that value analysis, cost reduction is one aspect of that value analysis, but staff productivity, operational resilience, and your ability to innovate faster, your ability to roll out new features faster also needs to be part of that value analysis in deciding which applications to modernize and which applications maybe not need to modernize and just lift and shift into the cloud quickly. At this point, I want to highlight another customer example. We talked about Live Nation first. So Aon Insurance is a major international reinsurance company. They are well on their journey of a hybrid model where a lot of their applications are on premise, but a lot of their applications are also on the AWS cloud. They are 3 years in, and they have now migrated over 150 applications to AWS, enabling their cloud-first strategy. This has led to a 50% reduction in their ideation time, and also they are getting better cost optimization. They are able to quickly deploy new features and move new applications to the cloud because now they have the experience of doing this again and again. With that, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into the migration journey. We have helped thousands of customers migrate to the cloud. And based on our experience working with customers, we have devised this process in a 3-step way, which is assess, mobilize, migrate, and modernize. I'm going to introduce the customer journey, introduce the process to you, and then Michael is going to dive deeper into each of the phases. So typically what we see is that the assess stage is all about creating that robust business plan and robust case for change. Migrating to the cloud is just not about technology. It is also about upskilling people. It is about change management. It is about bringing the right value to the business. And this is why it is very important to define what is that value upfront. So we help our customers by providing them tools like Migration Evaluator, where they can right-size their application workload to the AWS environment, not just do like-for-like transfer, because at times it can actually mean you're spending more money on the cloud. And then once you have done that value analysis, then we have tools such as the Application Discovery Service, which really help you understand what are the dependencies in your application that you need to take care of before you start to move it into the cloud. It is also very important for customers to understand where the data in their environment is right now. And as they proceed further with the changes with this plan, we advise our customers to migrate one or two applications maybe and gain that experience really quickly, because the more they do it hands-on, the better they have an understanding of what challenges lie in their own inherent environment. And every customer's environment is unique. We fully acknowledge that. It's very important for customers to really understand what lies in their environment, what data dependencies do they have, and what is the experience of migrating an application to the cloud. And once they have that experience, then they can quickly accelerate migration at scale. I would like to call out solutions such as Migration Hub, Cloud Endure Migration, Server Migration Service, that really help customers manage the mobilization of resources and manage the application migration process cycle fully. So at this point, I want to hand it over to Michael, who's going to dive deeper into each of these phases and also talk to you about some unique perspective that we have based on helping our customers through the enterprise support mechanism. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Hitan. And Padma, do we have any other questions on the chat?
Not on the chat. Welcome all the questions, everybody. Hitan, a follow-up question, right? You talked about all these tools and services. Can you expand a little bit about building a business use case and maybe AWS services and tools and best practices we can use?
Yeah, so I think one of the key services that we advise our customers to use is the Migration Evaluator. And like I talked about it, it's very important for customers to right-size their environment to AWS. So Migration Evaluator is a tool that I would like to call out. If you're really early in your journey and you're not sure where to start, then you can always take the Cloud Adoption Readiness Assessment that we have on AWS website. And it really helps you understand what's your readiness in terms of business, in terms of change management, in terms of applications, where you are in that process and what's the right place to start. But again, that's for customers who are really early in the process.
Thanks for sharing that insight, Hitan.
Sure.
Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Padma and Hitan. So as we get into this, like Hitan was saying, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the deep dive in each one of these phases, where we're talking about the assess, the mobilize, the migrate, and modernize. And I'll touch on each one in detail. Really going to probably spend a lot of my time talking about modernize and the migrate on the third of the stages. So here, I just want to talk a little bit about kind of the core services with AWS, which we see used pretty much everywhere in support, and we engage with a lot of customers on these. So when you look at kind of building out and getting started, a lot of it really begins with AWS organizations. Using that, it really makes it easy to do your multi-account management and administration, whether you have just a handful of accounts, dozens or hundreds or thousands. AWS organizations tends to be that central part. And then you can leverage on other services, for example, Control Tower, to give you help with governance and guardrails. And that's going to include stuff like AWS Config, License Manager, AWS Service Catalog, and a lot of these other services that fall into that segment. And then you also have the ability to do automatic code deployments and infrastructure management for using services like AWS OpWorks, AWS CloudFormation, right? You can use stack sets. So if you're using, for example, control tower and landing zones, you can easily deploy and manage and make changes to your environment using CloudFormation. Then you've also got security, right? Security is the #1 job for AWS and for all of us, and probably for all of you. It's something that's obviously going to be top of mind. So to be able to help you do that, we have AWS services such as CloudTrail, logging all of that access. You have role-based access and permissions and policies using the AWS Identity and Access Manager. And then you have billing, and you get a lot of useful things, easy access to view your current and past bills through the AWS Cost Explorer. You can set up notifications using AWS budgets. And something that I think is really critical, and as you grow on AWS, in my opinion, it's really comes central to a lot of your looking back as to your usage and your costs and everything, and that's the AWS Cost and Usage Report. It is a great line-by-line breakdown of your usage, of your costs. You can get hourly detail, and you can use services like AWS Athena and AWS QuickSight to really be able to dive in and visualize all of your data and your finances and billing. There's a really great AWS solution that was published very recently, talks all about setting up a cost intelligence dashboard utilizing your Kerr, Athena, and QuickSight. So highly recommend taking a look at that. It's really interesting. So we're going to go ahead and dive into the assess. I expect most of you watching right now are probably beyond this stage, or you've at least done this for your initial workload and starting to get that experience on AWS. But I do still want to spend a little bit of time talking about it anyways. As Hiten brought up, the Cloud Adoption Readiness Tool, which I know Padma dropped into a link for that into the chat, that's a self-assessment that you can do. There's 16 questions, and you go through there. Some of them are yes, no, some of them are multiple choice, but they really help you to go through the 6 different dimensions that we have identified to help you evaluate where you are in your readiness journey for your cloud journey. And then we also have the Migration Readiness Assessment Workshop. And this is typically an all-day workshop that you do with AWS or one of our migration partners. And we walk through and break down the same type of information that you would get in your, you get yourself from the Cloud Adoption Readiness Tool. But we dive deeper. We help to identify perhaps the best migration patterns that would work for you in your situation, since every customer and every workload is going to be different. And then lastly, I do want to touch on the Migration Evaluator, formerly TSO Logic, which Hiten touched on. And that allows you to really go deeper and look at that cost analysis. And I think this is a really important chart here where it talks about when you just do that initial lift and shift, how costs can be the same or sometimes a little bit more if you don't right size your environment. At AWS Support, we have this conversation all the time with customers. They're asking us questions with, how do I optimize my costs? How do I right size my EC2 instances? Because a lot of times customers are just going to say, oh, I've got this 16 core, 64 gig server with whatever storage, and I'm just going to bring that over. And that I'm going to run a similar type of EC2 instance, maybe an M5 extra large. But that's one thing when you have the cost of that in your data center, right? You've already purchased that equipment, you've got it using, it's on running 24/7. Even if you don't use it 24/7, even if it's only using 20 or 30% of the resources, you don't have the ability to swap out hardware on premise as easily as you do in the cloud with AWS, where you can migrate and move between a variety of different EC2 instances, sizes, and families. So that's just a really important takeaway I want to touch on here, is right sizing your EC2 instances, also RDS instances, and a lot of that gets into detail through a variety of these tools. So now let's talk on the mobilize, right? So we've assessed, we've looked at our applications, we've looked at our environment. So let's start getting up and get going. So we've pretty much done everything here, talking about the disconnected and incomplete data and gathering that together through a variety of tools. And I'm going to touch on some of those tools a little bit later on when we're talking about the AWS Migration Hub, which I think is a great service to use when you're doing your migrations into the cloud. But once you've done all that, we have where you've discovered, you're organizing your data, you're breaking it down into your different workloads, categorizing them into applications, what the performance profile of them looks like, and then what your infrastructure needs to be in order to support it. So we have the 7 R's. We're building on Gartner's 5 R's, and we've got refactoring, replatforming, rehosting, relocation, repurchasing, retaining, and retiring. And these all line up with what Hiten was talking about earlier in kind of those 4 areas that we see customers doing. If you look at that 50% lift and shift, that tends to be your replatforming, your rehosting, your relocation, and your retain. Repurchase often falls into that 20% SaaS, where you have a product or service, you're using something third party, and whether it is self-managed or hosted SaaS, you can a lot of times achieve a lot of additional agility and cost savings through moving to those types of offerings. 10% of retire, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then 20% to modernize, which is your refactoring. And like Hinton touched on earlier, and I'll mention a little bit later as well, is it's that part of differentiating yourself from and your products and your services from others, and what you deliver to customers, that we really see the value there. And in AWS Support, we're constantly helping customers when they get to that stage and reinventing themselves. So the migration effort often takes years, and in some ways it never ends, because you get to this point where you have all of these migrations completed and you've cleared your backlog, and now you have the opportunity to look at reinventing yourself. So now we're on AWS, right? You've maybe moved your first workload, you have gained a lot of experience, you've built up that skill set within your organization, done a lot of training. So now you're looking at how am I going to operate? How am I going to take this to the next level? And how am I going to get bigger? So there's a variety of different ways that you can do this. A lot of people often start off with doing it self-managed. So using services like the AWS Service Catalog and AWS Systems Manager, and a variety of the different tools that we have available to help that manage yourself. But then a lot of times customers like to continue their journey with a partner that they're already using in their business today. And a lot of those are a part of either the AWS Partner Network, the APN. They might be a part of our migration service provider. And so that allows you to work with somebody maybe you already have that experience and that history with, already knows your systems and environment, and are capable of helping then bridge that between your legacy and maybe your on-prem or colo or other cloud environment, and doing that with AWS. And then finally, we've got another category of customers who prefer to kind of shop all in one place, and they like to use AWS managed services. And AWS managed services can help do everything with hands-on keyboard and set up, say, your organization, set up control tower, use an AWS managed landing zones, and all of these things to, while you are getting upskilled and making that transition and figuring out what things, again, that retire, that portion of it. We talked about that at the top of the show. And then also what you're going to lift and shift, what you're going to replatform. So there's a variety of different ways, a lot of kind of options available to you as when you were operating solely on-prem. There's, self-host. You look at, say, managing your own services on EC2, and then you can step up that managed service ladder. So for example, for databases, moving into, say, RDS, and then something fully managed like Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL. So now we're going to get into the back half and talking about migrate and modernize. But before I do that, I do want to ask Padma, do we have any questions in chat that have come up?
We do have a few questions on the chat window. Michael, thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you all for your questions. Let's go over some of those. So from Mr. Builder 10, welcome back and thank you again for your questions. When migrating to existing environments, does AWS always recommend using Control Tower? So I'm going to quickly share a link on Control Tower. Yes, Control Tower helps you employ some of those best practices, such as if you want to configure multi-account structures, enables you to enable the AWS single sign-on, and so on. I will share some link. Michael, would you like to add anything to that question?
So I always recognize Control Tower. I think you have to look at the use case. If you talk with anybody at AWS, right, we're often going, one of the first things we're going to ask you is, so what is your use case? So I don't know that I can say as a one size fits all that we're always going to say Control Tower, but Control Tower is a great help in simplifying the setup, the administration, the management, the governance, the guardrails of having, say, a larger multi-account AWS organizational structure. So it brings a lot of efficiencies and benefits. So for example, along with AWS config, using service control policies to limit, for example, maybe what one group, the types of EC2 resources or the services that they use. There's a lot of benefit there. I think it comes with perhaps the scale of your organization as well as your maturity in cloud operations and where you choose to leverage your skills and assets. So I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to ask follow-up, and Padma will bring it up, and we can talk maybe towards the end of the show. Any others that you want to cover, Padma?
Definitely.
Okay.
And here's another question from Paul Kengier. And I hope the link that I shared with you helps you, Paul. Solutions architecture involving the use of Athena and QuickSight. Thank you for bringing up the question. Really, that helped me share a link on the chat window. We have another question here also from eager to learn AWS. Love that username. About the cloud practitioner, certified cloud practitioner test. And thank you, Alex Masha, for answering the question on our behalf. I'll also share the link to the exam practice guide. With that, back to you, Michael.
All right, thanks, Padma. I hope the question was answered to everybody's satisfaction on Athena and QuickSight visualization analysis. I mentioned that earlier about the Cur. Honestly, it's something I'm super excited about. It is just really kind of easy to use visualization, sharing. I love the ability to deep dive with that. And so, yeah, look into it. If you're not using it, really super powerful, great stuff that you can do with it. So I'll go ahead, continue on to modernize and migrate. This is kind of the back half and kind of probably the meat and potatoes where a lot of you are working in today, day in and day out. And a really big part of this that I feel is a service that maybe a lot of you might not be familiar with, and that is the AWS Migration Hub. The great thing about it is it allows you to track from the beginning of your journey on-prem and that assessment and that evaluation, and all the way through actually getting those deployed and running them in AWS. And it's really simple. It's got a great overview to it. There's a lot of interesting ways that you can get your data into it. So it starts with discovery, right? So we have two different types of discovery methods. We've got the discovery connector, and that operates as a VMware image, and it deploys right into your environment and allows you to very quickly gather the data that is present in those virtualized instances. And then we also have the discovery agents. And so the discovery agents allow you to deploy on physical or virtual Windows and Linux systems in your environment, as well as on Amazon EC2 instances. I want to point that out because, say, for example, you're doing some type of a merger and acquisition, and you're bringing another company's environment into your own, or perhaps you had started off a different part of your organization had started off on the AWS journey, and you're trying to get an evaluation and a determination of what it is that they're running. So the discovery agent is a way you could do that. There's also a variety of third-party tools and services, and I'll touch more on those in a little bit, but that allows you to bring all of this in, put it into Migration Hub, visualize it, and then once again, talking about the Athena and QuickSight allows you to see it and share it with others in your organization. So this is a little look-see of what the AWS Migration Hub Dashboard looks like, and it's really great. So I talked earlier about getting the data in. I talked about the discovery agent. I talked about using the discovery service with VMware, but you can also bring in data using third-party tools and software. There is also the CLI and the API where you can use to push your own updates into. So for example, let's say you are using some other third-party tool or software or some type of content management database that has all of your systems and data and info in there. You can then create CSV files. You could upload or import those and use the CLI and API. Now, if you're using one of the supported tools, so for example, you migrate servers using AWS Server Migration Service, or the AWS Database Migration Service, or Cloud Endure Migration, or ATA Data, then their status will be automatically updated. So you'll see it go from in progress or replication starting, and it will follow all the way through to migration completed or AMI has been created. And that's a really great way for you to be able to see, where am I at? And when you bring in a lot of these different tools and the data on your applications and things like that, you can put them into groups and use that to identify where you are with the individual ones, the individual applications and servers, to be clear. Sorry about that. But also you can then use roles and permissions and policies to share this with other people within your organization. And so that really helps them self-service. Where are my applications? Where are my systems at in this migration journey? So if you are still going through this process or you're looking to start a new migration, give AWS Migration Hub a look, as well as these other supporting tools and the discovery agents, because it really could make your life a lot easier. All right, so let's talk about some of the hybrid options and scenarios, because migrations will often take years to complete. It is sometimes difficult to work through that backlog, which you have. And so this is something that is going to span over a large period of time. And then you might still have certain applications and services or things that stay running either on premise or at your colo. And one of the ways that you can keep this both for your migration and then even after it's done for continuing to run in a steady state is AWS Direct Connect. I think that this is a really key functionality that is there to be able to support that hybrid environment along with VPN and other solutions. But it's kind of that key underpinning there. And then you have a lot of other tools which allows you to extend the management that you have both on-prem as well as with AWS. So when you're looking at, say, systems manager, I covered license manager before. There's a lot of different services and tools which allows you to operate on both sides of the house and kind of make a more seamless experience using these single tools. For example, being able to take images and instances from on-prem to AWS using VMware Cloud on AWS is a really great way to simplify it. You have the ability to bring AWS and extend our infrastructure on-premise using AWS Outposts, and those are really cool. You can get racks, partial racks, multiple racks, and be able to bring AWS services like Simple Storage Service or EC2, Amazon EBS, and we've really expanded that out. You have other services available to you now, such as Amazon ALBs, ECS, EKS, RDS, Amazon Elasticache, as well as Amazon EMR. And this allows you to run these AWS services locally within your data center for those really latency sensitive applications and functionality which you might have. And it's a fully managed service and environment. Really exciting if you haven't looked at it. Then I'm going to touch on a couple of other items along that same line. So for example, if you look at AWS IoT Greengrass, which gives you local execution of AWS Lambda messaging and more for your IoT devices. Basically, you can have your IoT devices running locally or disconnected from the internet, but connected to your infrastructure. And then that goes through IoT Greengrass and then connects into the AWS cloud. And then lastly, I'll touch on the AWS Snowball Edge, which allows you to have this ruggedized compute and storage in a variety of remote environments. And we're talking here about using this for migrations, but there's a lot of other use cases that people use just for their day-to-day. For example, if you are a media or entertainment company and you're doing on-site filming in a remote location, this gives you quick access to that AWS compute and storage wherever you're at, and then pull it on site wherever you have higher bandwidth or connectivity, or bring it back to your home office. And then you can also do it for business continuity, disaster recovery. There are just a whole multitude of options that you can use a device like the AWS Snowball Edge. So that pretty much brings us to the end. So I want to talk about, from a support perspective, what AWS Customer Enablement looks like as part of your migration and beyond. And this is kind of the net of available services and features and things and partners that you have. So whether it is AWS Managed Services, which I talked about earlier, can help you get up and get running. AWS Professional Services, which can also provide you hands-on keyboard. That is typically more project-focused. For example, I've worked with a customer that needed help setting up an application to be able to extend their environment and their elasticity, because they were limited in their on-premise and their colo, and they couldn't expand out. But they wanted to be able to grow for certain types of peak events and things like that. And AWS Professional Services was able to come in and help them with that. We also have what's called AWS IQ, which allows you to do smaller on-demand tasks from AWS certified third-party individuals and companies. So that's something you might also want to check out. Earlier on, I talked about the APN, or AWS Partner Network, and also our migration service providers. We have thousands and thousands of those all over the world. So wherever you happen to be watching this from, more than likely you have a choice of many of them nearby that can help you, whether it's a part of your migration or just running in your day-to-day operations. I'm going to quickly touch on AWS training and certification. Obviously, this is really critical in making sure that you and your staff are up and ready to go on your cloud journey. It's really helpful to be able to ensure that your staff has the skills and that knowledge and that ability to learn and to adapt and migrate and reinvent your applications and your infrastructure on the AWS cloud. And then lastly, my favorite is the entire AWS support family. Here, talking about break fix or issue resolution, or even proactive guidance. For example, in enterprise support, in my world, really helping customers of all sizes and across all industries solve solutions and architecture, and learn how best to use the cloud or reinvent themselves. It's a lot of fun. So with that, I'll go ahead, and I'd like to bring Padma and Hiten back in to see, do we have any other questions in chat that we'd like to answer?
Oh, we do have one question. And before I go into the question, a quick note to the attendees: all the links that you're currently seeing on this slide, I will be posting it here on the chat window just momentarily. So while we do that, I have a question here from Alex Masha. The question is, are there any specific tools and processes that can track the costs of resources from on-premises to the cloud? Any comments on that, Hiten or Michael?
Hiten, do you want to start?
Sure. I think Cost Explorer, and so if you are starting to understand your usage of services and you're trying to build a TCO or an ROI model, I think the AWS pricing calculator is a good place to start. And then the next in the process can be Cost Explorer. And then when you are operating on the AWS cloud, then I think there are many other tools and services based on what applications you're using and also what you're trying to do. Are you trying to create, are you trying to feed data into an ROI model? Are you trying to manage your billing? So based on that, the services can vary. Michael?
Yeah, so I'll touch on if you're tracking what you have on premise, Migration Evaluator, formerly TSO Logic, is probably where you might want to look, because that really has that deeper dive where you have product managers and solutions architects come in and get a deeper dive into your existing infrastructure and then do that analysis to say, this is what it looks like. This is what it's costing you today. This is what it would look like if you just did a wholesale lift and shift. And then these are some recommendations that we have into how you would right size and be able to bring those costs down. And then a lot of the services that Hiten was just touching on. And of course, I mentioned one that's really my favorite for the AWS resources, which is the cost and usage report, because it just has such fine-grained detail access. And something that I want to be sure to touch on is that when you bring this data in for Migration Hub, you can do tagging. And that's a great way to be able to group your resources into either their application or a line of business or a team or a product or a service, and look at those individually so you can create different types of reports and visualizations just for those and give those to the owners of them so that they can have that insight and better manage those costs. So there's a lot of different services and tools depending on where you're at. So again, if you're talking about on-prem, I'd really recommend looking into Migration Evaluator, on the Discovery Agent, the Migration Readiness Assessment, a lot of different things that are available. And then when you're on AWS, a lot of those services we touched on. Hope that answers.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Michael and Hiten, for sharing your experience and insight on today's topic. I did paste the URLs from the recommended resources for additional reading. Today, we discussed the motivation and the benefits of migration to the cloud. We looked at various AWS services and tools that will enable you to migrate no matter where you are in the cloud journey. We hope today's discussions helps you choose the right mix of tools that you can use to migrate with confidence. If there were any questions that were not answered today, you can post your questions on forums.aws.amazon.com and email us any feedback. We want to hear from you. What else would you like to see in the show? Please email us at kc-live@amazon.com. Thank you for joining us today at AWS Knowledge Center Live, and happy cloud computing.
Bye.